I welcome you all. My name's Ken Feinberg. I am the chairman of the board of the John F. Kennedy Library Foundation. Last night was an extraordinary event in the history of the library. But it was all preliminary to the main event, which is this breakfast. And in a very real sense, that happens to be the case. On behalf of the John F. Kennedy Library Foundation, I am very pleased to welcome you to the first ever Profile and Courage Essay Contest breakfast. We are delighted that so many of you could join us this morning. We are grateful to Stephen Rothstein, Executive Director of the John F. Kennedy Library Foundation, and Jamie Roth, Acting Director of the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum, who made this event possible. I also acknowledge my predecessor as chairman of the board, former U.S. Senator Paul Kirk, sitting right there. And I note Jack Schlossberg, who gave great comments last night. Jack, thank you for representing the family. Last night was a historic event here at the library, a meaningful high point in this institution's history, and a fitting way to celebrate the 100th anniversary of John F. Kennedy's birth. This morning, we continue the festivities as we honor the winner of the National John F. Kennedy Profile and Courage Essay Contest for high school students, the Youth Companion Program of the Profile and Courage Award. The contest introduces high school students across the nation to the concept of political courage and challenges them to use their research and writing skills to craft new stories of political courage. It encourages young people around the nation to reflect on political leadership in a new way, and perhaps even consider how they might personally become involved in public service. We are fortunate today to have many members of the Profile and Courage Award Committee here, led by our chairman, who is part shrink in leading this great Profile and Courage Committee. Al Hunt, where's Al? Al Hunt, ladies and gentlemen. You have to see him in action, trying to corral votes on this very, very competitive and very, very conspicuous committee. In addition to Al, in selecting the very deserving and inspiring recipient of this year's Profile and Courage Award, the committee also had the pleasure of choosing the winner of the essay contest for high school students, both President Obama and today's recipient. Will the members of Al Hunt's committee please stand and be recognized who are here today? And a very special thank you to an unnamed leader of our committee, Esther Cohn. We're Esther. We are sincerely grateful to John Hancock and the invaluable financial support it provides to make this program possible, and John Hancock's support over the decades on behalf of the Presidential Library and the Foundation. We especially thank Tom Crohan and Yasmin Cruz. Where's Yasmin? She here. And Yasmin Cruz, both of whom are here today representing Hancock. Megan Greeley, who served as a second-round judge, is also part of Hancock. Megan, thank you. Now, I'd like to invite Tom Samoluk, Vice President and Counsel at Hancock, a member of our Board of Directors of the Foundation, to come up and say a few words. Tom, thanks so much.
Thank you, Ken. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ken. It was truly a magical night last night. Congratulations to you and to Stephen and the entire team, and to Jack and the rest of the Kennedy family. It's a night that all of us will remember for a long time. Ken has taken one of the things that I wanted to do, which was acknowledge my John Hancock colleagues who are active and involved, obviously, in the support of the library. As last night, two other colleagues of ours, Craig Bromley, the president of John Hancock, was here last night, as was Jim Gallagher, last year's dinner chair. So we like to think that this year's chair stood on the shoulders of Jim Gallagher and brought it to new heights, but it was a wonderful evening. As a foundation board member, we at John Hancock were very proud, as I said, to be part of it, and we're equally proud to be here this morning to celebrate and recognize Daud Shad, the 2017 Profile and Courage Essay Contest winner, a contest we proudly support, as Ken was saying. Daud's essay profiled William Moore McCulloch, a Republican U.S. Congressman from Ohio, who in 1963, under great pressure, still chose to do the admirable thing and be a profile in courage and supported President Kennedy's civil rights legislation. Daud's winning essay stood out for its impressive research and writing, but it was a tough year to judge. Not that we were counting, but there were 2,248 student essays were submitted from students throughout the United States, all 50 states and Washington, D.C., and from U.S. citizens in Bulgaria, Canada, China, England, Germany, Japan, and South Korea. It was the largest response in the awards history, so it's catching fire. Next year maybe we'll get a few hundred more. But it was great last night. Not only was it a great evening, but we sat with Daud and his parents, and I have to say, this kid knows how to work a room, because he was not leaving until he got that photo with President Obama and Vice President Biden, and he was successful in probably any other member of Congress or former member of Congress who was there. I think he got that photo. But I know that Daud was inspired by the legacy of John F. Kennedy, and as the library celebrates the centennial, it's our hope that young people from across the country gain a deeper understanding of President Kennedy's legacy and a better appreciation of the importance of political courage and active engagement. Now, it's my honor to introduce the next speaker, someone who I also had the pleasure of getting to chat with last night, Al Hunt, a world-renowned columnist for Bloomberg View, committed chair of the Profile and Courage Committee, and a longtime supporter of this library. So now it's my honor to turn the podium over to the chairman, Al Hunt. How about a nice round of applause, Mr. Hunt? Great to see you. Thanks, Al.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. What an extraordinary couple days. As last night was one of the most magical moments of my life. This morning is extraordinary. And we're just building, in case anyone doesn't know, tonight, Ken Feinberg is going to give an address to 1,800, and he's going to have his text ahead of time. Everyone's invited to cheer on Ken Feinberg. Right, Ken? I think it's going to be aired on MSNBC and CNN. I am the chairman of the Profile and Courage Committee, and it really is an honor to introduce this year's Courage Essay Contest winner. As Tom said, we had 2,248 submissions from high school students in 50 states and the District of Columbia. We wish it were a state. There were 83 judges that read the essays during 3 rigorous rounds, and I think I'm right, Esther, they were also from 7 different countries that we got essay, including China and Korea, and it's just extraordinary, the reach that you all have achieved. The judging was really rigorous. We have several of the judges here tonight. If they would just stand up this morning, will they stand up? Because I'd like to just thank them. I've done this for, I don't know, 13 or 14 years. You get old, you lose track. And I've always thought this was inspiring to read these essays. This year was far and away the best. I think everyone agreed. And it really was agonizing at the end. I mean, we had votes. I mean, it wasn't an easy decision. And we had votes not because there was any doubt about the winner, but because the others were so good. And this one, finally at the end, this was clearly the best, and that was really an extraordinary achievement. Daud Shad, I have only one thing in common with the great Edward M. Kennedy, who was our inspiration here. I can botch names up almost as well as he could. So if I mispronounce a name, understand that that's in keeping with the former leader of this committee. Paul Kirk is laughing, I know, because he's seen it. But he's a senior at Mountain Lakes High School in Mountain Lakes, New Jersey, where he is president of both the Student Government Association and the National Honor Society. He's a volunteer firefighter. He serves as a member of Big Brothers Big Sisters of America and an officer for the Morris County Operation Smile. Daud will attend Yale University in the fall, where he's going to study political science and human rights and continue to hone those exceptional writing skills. His winning essay profiles William McCulloch, a Republican U.S. congressman from Ohio who played a critical role in the passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, despite fierce opposition from many of his constituents and many Republican congressmen. And I think one of the great, when you read that essay, which I hope everybody does, one of the really great touchstones to last night and this award is that Daud cites the letter that Jack's grandmother, Jacqueline Kennedy, wrote to William McCulloch several years later, expressing appreciation for the incredible contribution that this courageous conservative Ohio congressman had made to that landmark act. Daud actually first submitted his essay in 2016. The judges weren't as good back then as they were this year. But I am so glad that you didn't win last year. And I really mean that because it couldn't have been as fitting as it was this year. It just, everything was perfect. And so I'm glad you decided to try again. You reworked it a little bit, tweaked it, edited it. We know a little bit about that, don't we, David Shriven? So I want to really congratulate you on just an extraordinary job. And it's with great pleasure that I present this citation, which I know Esther's going to bring to me in just a minute. Thank you, Esther. And the Special JFK 100 Scholarship Award of $20,000. Now, the family has one child who's just graduated from the University of Chicago, who's taking a year off at the Stimson Center, I think, before graduate school, though, right? Then you have Yale coming up for 4 more years, and you know what he's going to do afterwards. So that 20 grand helps. It really does help. So it really is, and it's such a special recognition of your outstanding research and writing on this topic. So Daud, would you please come up and accept this? Daud, you don't go, I don't think. We may want to start signing up people for the Schlossberg Daud ticket in 2036. Can we do it? Do we have to wait to 40? Every student who submits an essay is required to have a nominating teacher who helps with the editing and the writing process. And we're delighted to have Jerome Leonardi, Dowd's nominating teacher, here today. And we'd like to thank him for the guidance that he provided Dowd, and also like to award Mr. Leonardi a John F. Kennedy Public Service Grant to encourage student leadership and civic engagement.
Jack, why don't you just stay up here? Yeah, Jack, why'd you leave?
I think we're going to have a conversation now, so you guys don't get to leave.
Mr. Leo.
Esther, do I have, oh, I know, I have something terribly important. This is where I really am going to channel my inner Ted Kennedy, because I want to recognize Dowd's parents, without whom none of this is possible. And they are sitting over there, and it's Saima Shabir, is that good? Who's his mom, and his dad is Daud Shad. On a scale of 1 to 10, how did I do?
9.
His dad told me last night, I said, where do you get those writing skills? He said, I don't know, one from me. So, Mom, I give you credit for that. You all must be very, very proud, and I know he couldn't have done it without you. So let's get, where's Professor Leonardi? You're going to join us up here, okay?
See you guys.
Okay, gotcha. Oh, sorry.
Is he a straight A student?
Yes.
He is.
Yes.
Is that, you're not an easy grader, are you?
Oh, no, he's not. Tough one. Yeah. Oh, before we start, can I just thank everyone here for giving me this amazing opportunity and scholarship. John Hancock, the JFK Library, Esther for everything you've done, everyone in the committee, and my parents, Mr. Leonardi, all the judges here, and just all the great educators across the country who just really support their students and give them these opportunities to shine and follow their passions. So thank you to everyone here. I really appreciate it.
We also have some special gifts that were given to the library, and Jim Dickey, who's a great supporter of William McCullough, has provided several copies of books on McCullough, one written by former Congressman Charles Whalen and his wife, and the other is McCullough of Ohio by Mark Bernstein, which I think you used for a reference.
I did not use that book.
You didn't? No. You mean Esther put something wrong in here? I can
No,
blame it all on Esther.
I used the Whalen one, though.
Yeah. I just misread it, that's all.
I hadn't seen the other one before.
But he really was an this is, and when you think about the context of today, this was a conservative Ohio congressman from a small Ohio town, and civil rights was a burning issue. And you like to think there would be someone today who would rise to that occasion, the way William McCullough did on civil rights, or the way Bob Inglis did on climate change. And what we all lament is, or worry about at least, is does that person exist in today's polarized environment? So that's what makes this even more special. Let me just go ask you a couple questions. How did you pick McCullough?
Yeah, so when I was researching last year and I found out about the Profile and Courage essay contest, I knew I wanted to do something on civil rights because at the time I was really investing a lot of my time looking at speeches by prominent leaders of the movement like Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. and a bunch of other figures. And so when I found out about the contest, I knew that civil rights was the issue I wanted to focus on and the civil rights movement. So then I had to look around for figures, and I wanted to find someone who wasn't too well known, but who was instrumental in passing the legislation, because that's what real political courage is. And so I started pouring through different articles and Wikipedia pages to find the ideal person. And then in a photo of Lyndon Johnson, President Johnson, signing the Civil Rights Act into law, in the background there's a guy, Bill McCulloch, who was standing there, congressman. And he was a very humble-looking man. He wasn't very well known. And his name really popped out at me. So I started searching different people who I found in these photos. And William McCulloch was perfect because he wasn't too well known. There wasn't too much information on him, and I think he deserves to be recognized more because in history books you don't really learn about him, even though he was integral to the process. And yeah, he was a very humble man and did what he did because of his moral convictions, not because of any political expedience.
And the letter that Mrs. Kennedy wrote to him,
Yes.
that she alluded to the President's Profile in Courage book, or at least his celebration of courage?
Oh, sorry, what was it?
No, you cited
Yeah.
Mrs. Kennedy in your essay. I believe you cited the
Oh, yes,
letter.
I did, I
Yeah,
did.
and in that letter, she.
In the letter, yeah,
Yeah.
she wrote that without him it couldn't be done. And similar sentiments were said by JFK. And Esther had a quote before she showed me of how President Kennedy was saying how, basically without McCulloch, civil rights would not happen, how he was the essential component in passing the legislation. And also, RFK too wrote him a letter, and I found these letters online. There's a website, it was taken down actually, unfortunately, on William McCulloch, and I think his family and friends made it in Ohio, because back then they were having, I think a famous Ohioans contest or something, so people were submitting different nominations for the greatest Ohioan, and so they made a website for Congressman McCulloch, and on it they had a bunch of primary sources that his family and friends had put on, but that website was actually taken down. So on an article I was reading or something, they had a link to it because it was written a few years earlier, and that didn't work. It took me to some random website and some spam thing, and then but I knew all this information was on it. So then I went on an internet archive. It's called Wayback Machine, and it lets, because everything on the internet that's ever been put up is actually recorded, and you can go back to any URL or web page and access information as it was years ago, which was really nice to find that I could find it all from 2012, I think, and on it they had the letters from Jackie Kennedy and RFK.
That's great. Let's have a project which you can head to have them put that website back up.
Oh yeah.
All right. No, that's
It's a great
this
website.
could
Yeah,
be
it
a
was a
great
great
this
website.
this award should be a catalyst for that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, Jerome, you've been teaching for 46 years.
44.
44. I'm sorry, I exaggerate. How did you first meet Daud? Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, we have a very small high school, and it's very, there's almost a sense of family about it. And I guess during his sophomore year, we became friendly. Last year, I was in charge of the academic team, and Daud did some work with that. Disappeared a lot. Whenever I was looking for him, he was gone. But we
Don't
sat
tell Jerome. Don't tell his mom and dad. Okay. All right. Good.
We would have won too many events if he was there, so it worked out all right for the opposition. But last year we sat down to discuss the essay, looked at the essay, and I was really stunned that he even found Bill McCulloch, and because I vaguely remembered him from when I was in high school, and it was a great essay, and didn't win. Darn it! But as you said, it's a good thing he didn't win.
In retrospect, it
So
was
that
a
he
great
could
thing.
win it this year, And when Daud came back in September and said, I always present the JFK essay contest to all my students. And sadly, even a school as fine as ours, it's very difficult to get students to write for nothing. So I, this year, made it a motivation. I would count it as an essay. And I always say, if you win, I'll give you an A on an essay that you don't have to write. So not only did he win $20,000, he got an A on a paper, which is very, very difficult to do in my class.
Oh my gosh. Which was more important? Don't answer that question. Don't answer that question. You have said, I think, that to be a good writer, you have to be a good thinker.
Yeah.
Explain that and explain how this young man meets
Well,
those.
when you do research on, especially on a person, it's easy to get the quotes, it's easy to get the background, the information, and it's easy to put it on paper. Most students can do that. But to take it to the next level, realizing, for example, that McCullough went on the, I always say to my students, if you want to win by a nose, you have to be willing to stick out your neck. And that's really what McCullough does. And he noticed that. The good writers notice that. So it's not just the research, it's the thinking. It's taking the cold, hard facts and turning it into humanity. That's what a good writer does.
Well, he, as I remembered, I think this was in your essay too, he not only agreed to support this, but he said, we're going to end up with a good, tough bill. We're not going to go, I'm not going to keep doing this if you let the Senate play games and water this down.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Because previously they had other civil rights bills going through in the 1950s, and a lot of Republicans, because back then the majority of Republicans were in favor of civil rights legislation. Some wanted to keep it a state's issue too. It's a separate issue too with it, but a separate challenge with it. But there was, McCullough wanted to make sure that when the bill was finally enacted, that it was not anything short of perfection, and that's why he made sure that the Kennedy administration granted him autonomy sort of over the bill, and making sure that everything went through him independently, so he could verify that the bill was not weakened at all.
And he worked with the very liberal chairman Democrat from Brooklyn, Emanuel Seller.
Yeah.
I mean, they were not a natural pairing,
Yeah.
but they worked quite well together on
exactly.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, he had to look beyond partisanship, and he had to reach across the aisle to reach compromises, but he made sure that the compromises he reached were not compromising, I guess, the bill that he wanted to pass.
What was the most challenging part of this process, last year and this year?
I think the most challenging part when you're writing about someone you don't know and someone who's long gone too, is that you want to make sure that you're doing their story justice and that you're not creating your own version of their story, and making sure that everything you're saying is truthful to the person they were and the story and the message that they had. So that's always a challenge to do that.
Did it, for both of you, did it deepen your both appreciation and understanding and sense of courage?
Oh, without question. When you see the state of Washington today, over the last 20 years, if we had people like Bill McCullough and JFK, maybe some of the problems that are just sitting out there would be solved. So from my perspective, absolutely, absolutely.
Yes, I think one of the main takeaways is that political courage can come from any place and from anyone. You wouldn't really expect someone like William McCullough, who was from a rural district in Ohio, which was over 97% white, so there were few interactions with minorities there. And you wouldn't expect someone like him to stick his neck out on something as contentious as civil rights and put so much effort and so much of his time into an issue which didn't really benefit him at all in any way, except for the fact that it went along with his moral compass.
Mom and Dad, any thoughts about this process? And did you notice the growth in your son as he was doing this?
I think over the years he has matured as a writer. When we were reading his essays that he had written for his college admission, we realized that we could never write him. So he is just extraordinary in that he can put his thoughts and put them beautifully in words. Actually, when I read his essay that he had written for college, I almost started crying.
Does his older brother just was graduated from Chicago. Does he have the same writing talent, or his talent's different?
His talent is different.
Yeah.
He's more into factual writing, and he writes research papers on different topics. And he works with Dave and is writing a chapter in a book by Dave on terrorism. And he's going to go to, as you mentioned, Stimson for research in political science. But he's a different kind of a writer. He puts a lot of heart into his writing.
Tell me your thoughts. You also, if you want to tell an embarrassing story about him, that's great too. We don't mind hearing embarrassing stories.
Daud has always been a very kind person, so when he writes, a lot of compassion and kindness comes into his writing, which I think kind of makes him apart from other writers. Although, he studies a lot too, but I think his compassion shows in his writing. And we are very proud of him.
Oh, well, you ought to be very proud of him. We're not going to find anything embarrassing, are we,
No,
Professor?
I don't
No.
think so.
We looked. Who's got some questions out there? This is not a shy group. Martha, the Dean of the Harvard Law School.
Congratulations again.
Thank you so much.
Really excellent essay, and I second the motion to revive the website. I think it's a really great project. My question has to do with revision.
Yes.
Because you had written it before.
Yeah.
And you did revise it, and I wonder what went into that revision? How do you think about the revision process?
Yeah, so this year when I was revising it, it was in December, so around the time of college applications too. So at that point, I was like revising so many essays every day
Yes.
that it came pretty naturally. But I think last time, what I did this year was I switched around the placement of some of the paragraphs, and to make it flow better, I consolidated a little bit at parts. Some parts previously were too repetitive, so I had to cut those out. I changed some words around that were better suited. I think when you revise after a year too, your perspective changes on life, and then you can weave that into it. Thank you.
David Shriman, we know about.
Well, having worked for 10 years for Al as a writer, I know that the process of revision sometimes can be illuminating and sometimes can be infuriating. Of course, never with Al. But did you find the process, sometimes I've asked this of revising, did you find that you learned something in the course of that? Or did you just find it was just an arduous task that you had to do to get
Yeah, I didn't really find it arduous at all. It was kind of fun, honestly, because it's kind of, I mean, you're perfecting it. It was already there. The research was there, and so it was interesting just going back and just kind of sculpting it and making it.
Did you feel, oh, I love that paragraph, I don't want to move it, I know it, you have to second guess.
Yeah, well, I knew I had to. Well, I knew I had to change some things because last year it didn't win. So I kept that in mind.
That's, we announced the runners-up and all that, Esther?
The press release just came out, so we're
Today.
in the process of sending it out.
Because, I mean, as I said, yours was, the best, there's no question. But I remember the runner-up was another incredibly courageous figure. Now, see if my memory's right on this. It was the governor of Colorado who stood up to the Japanese internment. And it was the same kind of courage. Yeah, and it was the same kind of courage. And I remember, Martha, you'll remember this, going through that process. And it really was agonizing because both were, so beautifully done, and both were such extraordinary acts of courage. And I think they may have been the two best that I've read in 13 or 14 years. But, at the end, you just couldn't say that yours was anything but the best, because that's really how good it was. Do we have time for a couple more questions? Yes, ma'am.
You're both a writer and a leader in government in high school. So could you help us understand your generation, engage your generation? I've been working with your generation in my state of Pennsylvania for like 6 years, and I'm very encouraged. But I'd like to hear from you.
Just how to encourage.
Engage them in civics. You're
Engage them in civics. Yeah, I think one interesting thing is that this year voter turnout was 60%, whereas Mr. Leo and I were looking at in the 1880s, it was around 80%.
Yeah.
But, and it kind of relates to, honestly, John F. Kennedy's quote, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. And not enough people are, I guess, asking what they can do, and they're expecting things, but they're not putting in the effort to do so. And I think the main important thing is to always try to engage with different people and try out new things and new experiences. And I think from every different experience I've had, I've gained a lot. And when you get to see more of how different people live and different people and different lifestyles, then you get a broader worldview, and then you can really, then you really want to engage in the world more and lead and help others. Like, for example, my parents are from Pakistan, so I've gone there repeatedly, and that's a great experience because it's so different to the US, but also there are so many commonalities as well. And besides that, as we said before, as a volunteer firefighter, I've seen people from all over New Jersey who live different lives than me, and still we're all fighting towards I guess a common end and trying to make our lives better. So the important thing to do is to just always be empathetic and always care for other people. And the best way to do that is by opening up, I guess, opening up your perspective to new ideas and new people.
And
Is that satisfying?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Bob,
Following up on that, President Obama wanted to be the first partisan president. Didn't work out that way. But I wonder if it would work in your generation more than what you face in the election. In other words, when you run
Yeah.
for president, it's that,
we haven't settled yet what the ticket's going to be yet. Who's going to tell you? No.
I think so. Well, and I think there's two ways of looking at it. I guess with since so many people spend their time on media and social media these days and gain so much of their information from there, I think that's had a negative and positive impact on our generation. The negative being that it's actually in a way increased polarization, because then people only look at specific sources and biased opinions and kind of lock themselves into their own bubbles and with their own peers. But in another way, though, it's easier to engage with people with differing views and to.
Do you do that?
Yeah, I try to. I follow a lot of different news sources, like the National Review, but also Democracy Now! And all sorts of different perspectives, progressive and conservative, just because it's important to kind of learn why the other person is thinking this way. And I think it'll be hard to overcome the polarization, especially today, because, well, politics has become so nasty and so divisive. But I think it can improve if more people are willing to reach across.
Right. Yeah. We do that in class with our discussions, making sure that your view is listened to by the other students. And what do you want to say about the view? And is there some place in the middle where we can bring it together? But it has to start with listening. And that's what people are not doing. So I have hope. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's great. We have hope. Just quickly, finally, what do you hope? 3 months, you're going to be in New Haven.
Yes.
What do you hope? What are your hopes and dreams to
Hopes and
keep
dreams?
that growth going up there?
Well, I definitely want to try out a bunch of different activities, because in college there's far greater opportunities than in high school, and there are going to be people from all over the world and all over the country, which is going to be a lot of fun to get to meet all those people, and also to try out different things that you weren't really able to do in high school. Like Yale has many different publications in all sorts of different areas, so I'd hope to write for one of those and participate in other community service activities around campus.
And you can get advice from your future running mate about what to do there. Listen, this has just been terrific. I want to thank all of you, you two,
Thank you so
your
much.
mother and father, for just making this whole weekend so incredibly special. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you. Don't forget your plow.